So now we know that money in politics is a big issue. It's the issue that is pretty much at the core of every other issue, right? Now, apparently, however, when Bernie Sanders brings up Citizens United, for example, and the need for campaign finance reform, he's called a single issue candidate by his opponent, Hillary Clinton. Now, that narrative, turns out, gets unchallenged by even the so-called liberal media. Now, who is the liberal media? Well, every day I hear from Fox News that CNN and MSNBC are the liberal media. In fact, they are so liberal, they have that liberal agenda. They're paid for by George Soros, et cetera, on and on, right? They're so incredibly liberal. It's the liberal media. They're against conservatives. Now, that goes in contrast with the fact that these media corporations are just that. Giant businesses created to make profit. That's what they are. Now, one of the big ways that they make profit is from elections. They make a lot of money from elections and election news and advertising. Now, part of that is related to, of course, Citizens United. Now, these media corporations are making sure that they will back a candidate that will continue to make sure that they get that money, that their gravy train continues to stay on track. Now, according to fundraising disclosures released this month and in July, they revealed that lobbyists for media companies are raising big money for establishment presidential candidates, mostly Hillary Clinton. And now this comes from the long of The Intercept. Quote, the giant media companies that shape much of the coverage of the presidential campaign have a vested stake in the outcome. From campaign finance laws that govern how money is spent on advertising to the regulators who oversee consolidation rules, the media industry has a distinct policy agenda, and with it, a political team to influence the result. What result? Well, that result being that America elects someone who is not going to challenge the status quo, who's not going to challenge Citizens United. Someone like Hillary Clinton. Now, of course, I see arguments against that, right? Well, Hillary Clinton, she said she's going to appoint a Supreme Court justice that would overturn Citizens United. Well, how can we trust her? For me, I don't think we can. But there's also other criticism and arguments against that say, well, Hillary Clinton is the most vetted candidate. Now, Bernie Sanders, however, he's gotten a free pass by the media, which I think is absolutely wrong and absolutely ridiculous to say. But there's that narrative. There's also the narrative that, look, man, the media is always attacking Hillary Clinton. I mean, they're going after her. They're going after her in the emails. They're going after her in Benghazi. They went after her for so long. You know, on every little thing, they cover what Hillary Clinton has done wrong. On and on and on, right? Now, while the media does go after her, while they're doing so, they're also raising money for her political campaign. According to financial disclosures, the top fundraisers for Hillary Clinton include lobbyists who serve the parent companies of both CNN and MSNBC. Now, they do so through the National Association of Broadcasters. Now, they're a trade group that represents the television station industry. Now, these lobbyists fundraise for both Clinton and Marco Rubio, the two establishment candidates, the two most establishment candidates. You got the big media, the big liberal media, bankrolling both Hillary Clinton and Marco Rubio. Interesting. Here's more details. Now, according to law, presidential campaigns are obliged by law to send the FEC a list of lobbyists who serve as what they call bundlers. Now, bundlers, what they do is they go and collect all sorts of individual campaign donations, right? And they bundle them all together and then give it to the campaign. Well, one of these bundlers is Steve Elmendorf. Now, he represents CNN's parent company, Time Warner, on Capitol Hill. He's a lobbyist. Now, Elmendorf was also an advisor to Clinton during her 2008 presidential campaign. Now, he's also known as, quote, one of Washington's top lobbyists. And he's lobbied on a number of different issues. Now, one of the issues he's lobbied on was direct-to-consumer advertising policy. Stuff that makes them more money. Now, they also lobby against regulation on the media. Now, Comcast I recall, Comcast wanted to merge with another company and get bigger so they can get more market share, so they can make more money. Now, the Obama administration was against that. A Bernie Sanders administration would absolutely be against it. Hillary Clinton, well, I don't know. According to disclosures, he's raised about $141,815 for Clinton's 2016 bid for the White House. Would she be against a merger? I don't know. There's 141,815 reasons why she might be a little bit more amenable to it. I'm just saying. Oh, but no. Lobbying, giving a candidate money, that doesn't mean they're going to be influenced by that money. That's why I hear from so-called liberals who are supporting Hillary Clinton. See, Comcast, who's the parent company of NBC Universal, which includes networks NBC, CNBC, and MSNBC, also has a number of lobbyists on retainer who are working to raise money for Clinton, including Justin Gray, Alfred Mature, Ingrid Durham, and Catherine Pineau. Now, this is pretty important because much of that $5 billion expected to be spent over the course of the campaign will be on cable and network news advertisements, ads for candidates. Now, people like Bernie Sanders and Larry Lessig wanted to change that. What happened to Lessig? He got barred from debates. They wouldn't even let him debate. They wouldn't even let him bring his message to cable TV. They just wouldn't let him. He didn't exist. Bernie Sanders, they tried to do the same thing to him. Now, he was a lot better, and he fared a lot better than Lessig. But he's got that same message. They want to get that money out of politics. They want to get that money out of the media. Now, super PACs collect a lot of that money. And that money goes to ads and then ends up in the executive's pocket over at the networks. They like this system. They're a part of that system. They don't want to stop that system. In fact, Les Moonves, who is the president and chief executive of CBS, he said, quote, "Super PACs may be bad for America, but they're very good for CBS. They don't want to stop that gravy train. They love it. They're licking that gravy with a spoon." And of course, you might be saying that, okay, well, look, you're going to give money to a super PAC. That's your thing. It's called freedom. Freedom. But see, the whole problem of money in politics going to news outlets means that you're not going to get real news. You're going to get corporate sponsored news. Your news is going to turn into a commercial. And it almost has. In fact, consider the fact that barely any time on TV is now spent talking about the real issue of campaign finance reform. Remember, 80% of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, all think that money has too much influence in elections. If the media were serving the public, that would reflect what the American people feel. The media would. And they would be talking about it a lot more. Well, it turns out the media only represents large corporations and donors because they are large corporations that get lots and lots of money from Citizens United. Money in politics, man. Now, not only that, but a lot of these networks, they're also against disclosure rules. The National Association of Broadcasters and the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, the two media lobby groups that employ fundraisers for the presidential candidates, have also lobbied in recent years against legislation to disclose the source of funding for so-called dark money groups. So they're not only against ending Citizens United, right? They love Citizens United. But they also think that seeing who's donating to presidential campaigns, well, that's even a bridge too far. That's amazing. And if you're wondering how this ties into the Clinton campaign, I'm about to show you. Tony Podesta, the brother of Clinton's campaign chairman and a lobbyist who has raised at least $55,600 for the Clinton campaign, is registered to lobby on behalf of the National Association of Broadcasters. In 2010, his firm helped defeat dark money disclosure legislation on behalf of his corporate media clients. Now, the money also explains why there's a media bias against outsiders like Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, this comes from FAIR, which is a media watchdog group, and they reported that in June that Meet the Press mentioned Clinton 16 times in their first 17 episodes of the year. 17 episodes, every one of them mentioned Clinton. However, they had failed to invite or discuss Bernie Sanders even once. That was the Bernie blackout. The media didn't want to talk about him because he was actually talking about issues, especially the issue of corporate media and Citizens United. They don't like that. They don't want to mention that unless they have to. And now they kind of have to. In fact, Jeff Cohen, who's an associate professor of journalism at Ithaca College, said, quote, "It's clear that establishment politicians get softer treatment, in general, than outsider candidates." He also adds that, quote, "The coziness of the media industry with elite politicians of both parties has never been cozier." But if you're not part of that group, if you're like Bernie Sanders, then you're not going to get that. If you're actually raising real issues, you're not going to get that. They're not going to be cozy with you because you threatened to disrupt their gravy train. You threatened to derail it. You threatened to overturn their apple cart. Well, it turns out they love them apples. They love them. Now, I want to add that in all the debates and town halls that I've watched, I don't think I've seen any mention of campaign finance reform. Unless, of course, it's brought up by the candidate. And Bernie Sanders has tried to bring it up. But what I have seen from the same media, in the same debates and town halls, is that framing of the questions, they frame it from a decidedly conservative point of view. For example, Chris Cuomo had asked Bernie Sanders, why do you want to punish successful people with higher taxes? Taxes are a punishment. Why are you trying to punish us rich people? In order to give people health care. I mean, we don't care about them. We care about us. Why are you punishing us? You're going to raise taxes on people. It's all from a right-wing framing. And I had huge issues with the framing. And the blatant red baiting. For example, from Anderson Cooper. Now, if you compare the Democratic debates, which Hillary Clinton got some tough questions too. She got some very tough questions. And I like when they ask tough questions. But when they ask tough questions of Democrats, but then ask Ted Cruz, hey, you sing to your wife. What do you sing? What's your favorite cocktail? What kind of questions are that? What kind of questions are those? That's ridiculous. They're not doing, see, they're framing these questions from a right-wing narrative, and then they're going easy on the conservatives. Maybe they're scared to death of the conservatives. Or maybe these media companies are giant corporations that say, hey, these guys want to keep the money flowing to us. So don't disturb it. Don't ask them tough questions. Don't talk about campaign finance reform. Don't do anything that rocks the boat. Because we like the boat just where it is. That's exactly what's happening. Now, once again, Hillary Clinton got some very tough questions, right? But it's not because they don't favor her. Remember, their lobbyist groups are raising money for her. Now, the reason they ask her tough questions is, for one, she's a Democrat. And for two, they actually really like the horse race, especially on the Democratic side. The media loves a good fight. And look, if they didn't try to make a fight, it would be boring and nobody would tune in. If it were a coronation, it would be boring. Nobody would tune in. So the media loves to make them try to fight. And just so on the Republican side as well. And it's actually more of a race on the Democratic side than it is on the Republican side. Remember, Donald Trump is crushing everyone. So on the Democratic side, it's far more interesting of a fight. Now, finally, Fong writes in his piece, quote, "The increasing reliance on election season advertising revenue has created an incentive for media companies to promote the type of gladiatorial politics that lends itself to attack ads and soundbites, rather than a sober discussion of the issues at stake. On an conference call this year, Moonves, the CBS president, predicted, quote, strong growth with the help of political spending, given that the 2016 presidential election is right around the corner, and thank God, the rancor has already begun. They like the fight, they like to televise the fight, and then make millions off it. They love a good horse race. And look, so do I. But they make millions of dollars off of it. I like the politics. I'm interested in the politics of it, and dissecting the different views and what they're using to clash against each other. But the media isn't all really invested in that at all. What they're invested in is literally money. That's all they care about. So they do this horse race. And they make sure the politicians fight with each other. Because it's interesting. Now, as far as rancor goes, we've seen that on the Republican side, right? We've seen that actually much more than Democrats. But it is there. Now, going back to Bernie Sanders and the criticism that he is a one-issue candidate, according to Clinton, is because that issue is central to the problem of money in politics and the media. And of course, Clinton herself, who gets tons of money from corporate media. They don't want to end that system. This is why I don't trust her when she says she'll fight to rein in money in politics. She knows where her bread is buttered. And it just happens to be the major networks that make millions of dollars off political ads and will continue to make millions off a Hillary campaign and a Hillary presidency.